City of Stevens Point Board of Water and Sewerage Commissioners meeting, recorded January 9, 2023.
All right, it is 12 o'clock. Let's begin with the Water and Sewage Commission meeting. First item of business, as always, is the minutes. Any suggestions or corrections?
I've got a question on the first page of minutes under sewage treatment operations report. In the last meeting, Chris said that he hadn't received the report from the water lab, and I just wondered if we had that.
I forgot to include it in the new packet. Yes, we have it. It's been responded to.
As long as we get it.
Carry on.
Okay.
I just forgot to
include it in next month's packet.
I will do that.
And the next one, pumping out hydrants that don't drain. I didn't realize we had hydrants that didn't drain.
Well, there's a couple of things that can happen there. Craig, do you want to comment on hydrants that don't drain and what the guys do there?
Sure. To your question, Ray, some of them we have areas where there's high groundwater, so they don't drain out. And the new standard is if there are in groundwater that we need to plug them so the water can't get into it. So any new ones that we install now have plugs in them so they cannot drain. So what that also means though is that if they cannot drain, if they're open and operated, which they are at least once every year in the springtime, that they need to be pumped out in the fall. And we do check them again throughout the year just to make sure that there's no water in them so they do not freeze.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Any other questions? Motion to approve is in order.
I'll move for approval, Ray.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
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 Pose same sign. Motion carried. We'll start with the water department claims.
We got 2 months worth on each enterprise here.
Thank you, Joel.
A question on 57280. I assume most of that is for the 2022 construction. We pay the city back for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And in past budgets or claims, I've seen where we split the cost 3 ways.
Yeah, so in this one, it's not so much a splitting in any equal fashion. It'll actually be that on this one you'll see the actual water construction costs, and then the sewer construction costs, and then storm. So there are things that go to each of the utilities from the city every month anyway, like they say on there are certain benefits. But this is actually broken out like the cost per foot of water main, hydrants, and service manholes for water, that kind of stuff. And then sewer main, sewer manholes, that kind of thing for sanitary, and then all the stormwater infrastructure. Yeah.
I just questioned it because it was a little bit different for
Yeah.
stormwater.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
I have a question on 57256. The troubleshoot furnace issue. What building or
Yeah.
where's that? I know it's a small one, but
Yeah, you're going to be seeing some bigger ones for this, actually. The last week we had bad rover across the street at the utility garage quite a bit. They had to add some Freon, or I mean, what am I thinking? Sorry, yeah, glycol to the system. That is across the street. We have it's kind of a complicated system, and it'll go into alarm occasionally, and it takes somebody that works on those things to clear that alarm and get it back up again. So that's for the heat pump system and the makeup air unit over there both.
okay. Thank you.
All right. If there's no further questions about the 2 months of claims for water, we'll go on to the sewage department.
I just point. I didn't realize we were doing both at both months, but just and I saw the snow pusher show up on all 3 departments.
Mm-hmm. That is
343. Is that like a skidster or just?
Yeah, this one is one that we split kind of even ways. That is an attachment that goes on the quick connect of our tractor backhoes. So it's like one of the big box scrapers you see loaders pushing around, just a little smaller. The equipment's smaller than a big loader, but it does a good job. We do a lot of snow clearing around here and
Get a lot of
make good use of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, now let's go on to sewage. Questions?
I had a question on 57277, just for my own information. How is nitrogen used in the process? Is
That is, the safety nitrogen for our dryer system, for our silo in case it were to build up any heat or anything. They use nitrogen gas to basically make sure there can't be a fire. It cools it down and it also, displaces all the oxygen, which makes it not flammable. We've never actually used it for the safety purposes. It, over time, because it's delivered at such a cold temperature, that as it heats up, it evaporates. And we'll use gas that way. It'll just slowly, basically bleed off the system as it evaporates.
Cool. Thank you.
So is this, nitrogen, is that a year's worth, or how often is it replenished?
I think that was
Quarterly,
yeah.
maybe 3 times a year, somewhere in there is about what it's.
That tank's got to be 18, 20 feet tall.
Yeah, it's a big tank.
Feet around. It's a big guy.
Around an iron?
Yeah.
Further questions on sewage department claims? Okay, if not, on to stormwater. Doesn't look like anything too much out of the ordinary. And you finally kinda got me trained, now I get fiber as well. No further questions? We need a motion and a second to approve all 4 sets of claims.
So move Knockman.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carried. Joel, rate adjustments.
Yeah, so one-page memo in the packet, very briefly here. I think it's probably pretty well understood, the environment we're in with construction and maintenance and everything else, leads to, a little bit of, frequent attention to our rates is better than, going several years and having a real shocker. And then we had talked about that, in the last couple of years too, and that's the kind of preferred method. The 4.5%, you guys might recall, there's 2 different approaches you can use on the water utility side of things to adjust rates. One of them is a standard rate case, which is a months-long process where you get all sorts of information together. You pay somebody to put it together for you. Then you pay the PSC to tear it apart, and they tell you what you should have said in the first place type thing. It's kind of funny, actually. And then they give you your rate based on your current need and what your rate of return needs to be. The other approach is a simplified rate. You have to have 12 months of your current rates in place to go through that, and that was 13 months ago that we did this, so we're good there. And what they do is they establish a current simplified rate increase that is the same for everybody based on things like inflation and cost of our industry and stuff like that. So currently, the simplified rate case application is at 4.5%, which is a 4.9% yield on rates, or rate of return, not yield. I even used yield in there, sorry. Wrong term, rate of return. So those are the 2 we're proposing for water and sewer, evenly across the rate base. They may come back on the PSC side telling us that there's a couple small things. What didn't change last time, Mary? AM1. So they may come back and issue us new tariffs and leave a couple little things out. So we're just looking for the simplified rate case approach on water, approved by the PSC with whatever terms they come with, and that may leave out a little thing or two. Other than that, it's 4.5% across the board. And we'd request the same on wastewater, because those are just good inflationary numbers, good maintenance to the rates. The difference there, the larger one on storm, this actually came partially out of the last debt issuance we did. They were saying that some increases were needed in order to maintain the bond rating that we have. And so the 11% is part of that 22 that they said would be needed over the next couple of years. I know that number seems frightfully high, but remember, the stormwater utility has a much smaller rate base. So a pretty big percentage increase doesn't really result in a very big hit to the ratepayer. But storm, as you guys know, has been a real item of attention in the last several years with reconstruction, and we've been doing a lot of good construction projects that have fixed a lot of issues. And as we develop and reconstruct more downtown, that utility does expend, more money in reconstruction than the other two, if we're reconstructing the right infrastructure. So that said, 4.5 water, 4.5 sewer, 11% storm is the request. I put in there a real simple comparison. Generally speaking, we look at a family of 4 that consumes 2,500 cubic feet as a standard scenario, and people can kind of do some estimating off of that. With that said, a quarterly increase, because that's the frequency of our bills. Quarterly, you're looking at under $12 a quarter. So, about $4 a month, and that's what all of these rate increases amount to.
So that'd be about $50 a year.
Yep. So that's the request. Happy to field any questions if you got any. I think that we're not alone in the industry right now. Everybody's trying to keep up with increasing construction costs and stuff like that, and this is actually paced a little behind that, I'd say, but still gets us to where we need to be right now.
Couple years ago, we were looking at construction costs coming in below what we had budgeted for them, right? Are we not gonna ever get back to that?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a real good question. I think that what we can hope for is a bit of a leveling off. I don't know if we'll go down. I think that the one bump that we will have seen looking backwards is the fact that some things got really expensive with supply chain issues, right? So there's an opportunity to charge more, and hopefully that comes back down a little bit. But boy, I don't have a crystal ball for that. I wish I did. Yeah.
So I can understand the 4.5, the state pays that. What about the 11%? Are we looking at increases 11% a year?
Long term?
Foreseeable future?
No, some of this goes back to, so in the last several years, and I think it's about 6 now, 5, 6 years, where as a city as a whole, utilities, public works, we increased the pace of our reconstruction activities by almost 4-fold. And we've been, trying to get to that point where we find a new equilibrium with rates, and all told, it's amazing what we're doing with the rates we have. And the coordination between public works and utilities has been really, really good. That means that we're only paying for our stuff most of the time, and they're only paying for their stuff most of the time, which means the money is really well used, right? So some of this is still catching up with that pace. We drew our general funds down on all the utilities pretty rapidly for some projects, and now we're trying to get to that equilibrium where there isn't a huge amount of general fund growth or loss, but figure out where we need to settle down. And we did some borrowing for this year, for 23 and 24, to kind of even that out, because it would have been a bigger rate increase if we were to say, no, we need to handle this all through cash right now, right? But the goal is that, generally speaking, our annual reconstruction projects don't need to be borrowed for. So we're just kind of getting to that equilibrium in rates.
Okay, thanks for that explanation.
Yeah.
Who was the entity that furnished the 22% increase?
Not Foley. Who's the other one? Who does the bond rating? Moody's, I think. So Foley and Lardner is the city's financial advisor, and Moody does the bond rating. It was documents sent through one of them that indicated that, roughly speaking, to stay where we're at, the next couple of years, we'd need to see.
So that is reviewed, whichever one it is reviewed in the report that's supplied to the finance committee and the
Yeah.
council?
Right. I've got those documents too, if you're interested, yeah.
Any questions? Motion to approve is in order.
Move to approve this report.
Second.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
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 Pose same sign. Motion carried. $12 a quarter is pretty reasonable.
Yep.
Considering what a tremendous resource we have here for water.
Yep.
The next item is the 5-year renewal of the Isaac Walton League Agreement. I understand from talking to Joel that Mayor Wiesa had been negotiating with the president of the Ikes, which is Nick Holman, and also the secretary, which is John Dolan. And they've changed a few things from the language that was in there 5 years ago, primarily because of the fact that the new entrance to the Ikes that was required because of the fencing around the airport made some of the language in the old one obsolete. So, I guess the way I would look at it is if the mayor's happy, we should be happy, and I'd recommend we approve it.
Are the members of the Ikes happy?
They've already reviewed and acted and approved it.
Okay, good.
Yep.
That was what I needed.
I had meant to double check it. Is, the reference to fire protection, is this, in the town of Hull? Is
No,
that-
it's City of Stevens Point.
Okay.
In fact, that was the whole incentive for doing this to begin with. When this agreement was first adopted in, I want to say it was 1986 or 1987, something like that, the part of the carrot, dangling the carrot, was for the Ikes to move into, to be annexed to the city, because prior to that, they were town hall, as was said earlier.
You see everything that's not shaded here. So this is shaded, this isn't. Ikes are over in here, and that's all City of Stevens Point. This is Town Hall. Yep.
I was curious why we would need to have in the agreement to agree to provide fire protection.
I'm not actually sure on that, and actually there's several mechanisms that happen outside of this agreement to say nobody would refuse them fire protection anyway. You know, that's maybe one of those things that on further review could be stricken, because whether you agree to do it or not, they're doing it.
In the city, you get
Yep.
fire protection.
Right. Yep.
Well, you know how attorneys work.
No, I don't. They get paid by the
They
word.
all have different opinions, as they call them, about things. So,
Yeah, and actually, little shortcut here. Anytime you see a parcel number that starts with 281, it's City of Stevens Point parcel.
Other questions?
Do we need any action on this?
Yeah, we have to approve it.
Yep.
And then it'll get approved by, the common council as well. Is there a motion?
Move to approve?
Second, Nachman.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. I will note that, I've been involved with this contract since I was the finance director for the city of Stevens Point, so I'm quite familiar with it. And I was surprised to see that, there was not a provision for what has historically been a 5% increase every year. And I don't know if there was any increase at all, but I guess it doesn't matter as long as the mayor's happy and the Ikes are happy, should be okay. Okay. Water supply.
Afternoon, everyone. So first off, a couple things coming up on our radar. We have, every 5 years, the DNR requires us to inspect our water towers and tanks that hold drinking water. So we have the Water Street Tower on Water Street is gonna be inspected by a LV, so they'll be taking a actual camera and putting it down. Every other 5 years is required to drain and dive, or drain and inspect a person, so we're gonna be doing that coming up here in the next month. Also, we have the well 11 tanks are getting cleaned and inspected. And we're gonna coordinate that with the operation of all the laterals in the collector well. So we'll take the collector well offline so we can operate the laterals and flush out the debris that builds up in there throughout the year. There's 8 laterals in the collector well. So we do that. That's a big project coming up. And then the other thing
That, when you flush out those laterals?
Yeah.
Does it deposit the material in the big caisson and have to remove it from there? Or?
No, so we actually flush it up and out of a hydrant outside and goes out onto the ground. And the other one I wanted to bring up was getting to that time of year where we're going to start turning people on for frozen laterals. So Operation Deep Freeze will be happening here in the next 2 weeks. We'll be turning houses on to run their water for the remainder of the late winter, early spring until the water warms back up again.
Do we know how many of those residences we have?
Somewhere in the 70s, 70 to 80.
How many?
Yeah. A lot of water.
Over time, they decrease,
Yeah.
because where we can, we do, whatever construction or maintenance activities we need to make them unnecessary. So over time, they'll get less and less. Yeah.
Other than that, if you have any questions for me on the report.
I assume that since we have the most consumption in a 12-month period of as far back as we go to 2013, that I seem to recall that mill here in Stevens Point started to use more water than they historically have this year.
Correct, yeah, that started actually in fall of 21. We've noticed all their meters slightly increased in all of last year. It was just significantly the same, but an increase.
Okay.
I can give you next month, I can have a report with the rest of the end of the year for residential consumption versus industrial commercial that will report to the PSC. I can kind of that in a little figure for you can see what that was for the whole.
You probably have better things to do than that.
I do it anyways.
You're doing it for the PSC?
Yeah, we have to report it.
Okay, well, that'd be good. Thanks. So.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of water pumped last year.
Any other questions for Eric? All right, on to sewage. Chris?
All right, everything the last 2 months has been going quite well. We've met permit both months. Did get the biogas treatment skid back operational the last couple weeks here, right before Christmas. So we're able to utilize a majority of our biogas again instead of using natural gas. So we're back to square one again and back to fully operational. Got the reports from the last 2 months. If anybody's got any questions.
Do you have a quick idea of how much that saves us on utility costs?
I was looking it up earlier, and it's about $9,000 to $10,000 in biogas is what we use.
Annually?
No, monthly. Sorry.
Monthly.
Yep, per month.
Thank you.
Other questions for Chris? Okay, then let's go forward to Craig on construction and maintenance.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're in the process of winter operations, of course. Like we stated, we're checking hydrants, make sure they're not frozen. So if the fire department wants to use them, they're available. We did receive the new vac truck that you allowed us to get for our sewage. They are currently working on putting some final touches on their equipment that they would like on that truck this week. And they're also busy out at the airport. As you know, it's been snowing quite a bit, so they've been out there and doing some plowing and maintenance of the vehicles and stuff. So that's about it.
Thank you. Questions? All right, we'll go on to Joel and his community area network report.
We're at the point in our most recent project now which was involving some stuff around the police station, parks department, and then extending down to Plover Water Utility near rural water there, where all the infrastructure is in the ground. We got to get a guy in now to do all the fusing, terminating, splicing, that kind of stuff. So it's going well.
Do we have a guy?
No, we contract it. Yep.
And then Joel has a director's report as well.
Yeah, just a couple little things. Wanted to let you guys know, we'll be bringing capital. I know it's always been January or December for capital, and you'll notice we don't have it on the agenda today. There's a couple things going on that made me wait. One, tonight they're talking about the projects, the big reconstructs for this year, and there's going to be a little bit of discussion. I don't think anything that's going to really change course, but you never know, on assessments. So do we assess this? Do we assess that? If yes, then this. If no, then that. So I want to wait on that. Plus the projects are not fully designed yet. So before we get to putting prices out there, I wanted to get a little better idea. So that should come to you in February. The transportation utility, I wanted to bring you guys up to speed on this too. There will be a little bit of discussion tonight at finance about extra revenue sources for the city, city proper, right? City Hall. And there's a good memo that's out there in the finance packet, if you care to look at it, that talks about the options of implementation of a transportation utility exceeding the expenditure restraints which the state puts on the city. You have to do that through referendum, or a wheel tax. So there's a combination. There's kind of a side-by-side comparison that Comptroller Laddick did to say, here's our options and here's how they affect people. The reason I wanted to tell you is because if a transportation utility should be chosen to be implemented at the city, that will surely involve us a little bit in the way of trying to figure out how to bill that. We'll be working with the city in that regard because they don't have a quarterly billing mechanism like we do right now. So we'll work through that process. We have had enough discussions to know that it can be done. It's just getting a little more detail behind it if that's the method chosen. It's probably the least impactful to residents, the transportation utility is. So I think I'm not going to try to read tea leaves here, but I think it'll be the favorable approach if they choose an approach, right? So just want to bring you up to speed on that. We may be working with Public Works on that.
Joel has been talking to me about this for about 60 days now, and he understands that I'm not happy about that because we're going to look like, since we're sending out the bills, that the commission were the decision makers about that when we haven't even been consulted, say nothing about doing any decision making about it. And, you know, let's call it what it is, just another form of tax is all that it is. And, you know, I guess if they decide to do that, it's either one of those two, or no, just the transportation one, then that would be another line item on our water bills every quarter. Explain a little bit more about the specifics of that. What did you call it? Transportation what?
Transportation utility. So it works most like the stormwater utility. So the stormwater utility, you generate revenue by way of assigning an index of ERUs, the equivalent residential unit. And so each house is one ERU in a storm system. And very similarly, in a transportation utility, you set each single family resident to one ERTU. It's a transportation unit. And so they basically say that 9.43 trips are generated to and from residents every day. That's the average through this huge, like, monster ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers manual they put out. And since 9.43 isn't it's a number that can change, you set that equal to one ERTU. And so you say every residence, like we do with storm, is equal to that. And then you convert everybody else's based on these big studies to say, how many trips do you generate to and from your facility? So you can imagine something like a convenience store is much bigger. An attorney's office, not much, right? It goes on square feet. So if you have a 1,500 square foot office, it's not going to generate that much in the way of ERTUs, very small bill. but the things that do, there are some things, just think anywhere you see a lot of traffic flowing to and from grocery stores, big box stores, trucking type things. Those generate a little bit more, and it all gets worked out kind of that way. The initial revenue numbers for all three options that are going to be discussed tonight were calibrated to deliver a revenue of $500,000, just so that it's apples to apples. And I can tell you, I believe that the quarterly increase to the same bill that I outlined for you earlier to a single family resident is about $2 a quarter. It's about 11 something a year. So it's pretty minor in that regard. But again, that's because it's a residence. When you get into certain businesses that are big traffic generators, it's certainly more.
Transportation, are we talking about more than bus? I have no idea.
Yeah, actually, specifically not buses.
Oh.
So inside the city's budget, there's a whole list of things in the public works budget that are under the heading eligible, right? So these are eligible for transportation aid and stuff like that. All of those items, and there's a whole bunch of them, from maintenance to construction to, I suppose, wages for the right thing. There's a ton of the public works budget that is considered eligible, transportation eligible. It's those items that those funds can go to. And of course, if those funds go there, it frees those funds up for other things in the city that don't have funds now. And because we're still operating under our expenditure restraint, we can't just without a referendum can't exceed that. And with the referendum, you can only exceed it so much. So this is just opening the door to another small revenue stream that we'd end up billing, that they'd end up getting. Of course, there's some administrative costs that we recover, but
Because of what I said earlier, I would be more in favor of the wheel tax, because then the way the county gets their wheel tax is it's added to our registration fees for our vehicles.
yeah.
Is that the same way it would work? That's the option they chose?
To tell you the truth, I don't know, but the one thing I've heard talk about is that it's kind of looked at from a city perspective. A wheel tax is kind of looked at as a regressive tax. That is, the ones that are creating most of the expense aren't paying most of the fee. So you're gonna, you'll get places that don't necessarily license vehicles that all of a sudden may have a big impact because they're generating a lot of use on our roads. But if they're not licensing vehicles, like a grocery store doesn't license vehicles, right? But a person does. So you're going to pay almost all of that as a resident, where the places that are generating, where your destinations are, don't. So it depends on how you look at it. But I would encourage, just on the finance agenda, take a look at that memo. It's a pretty good one. I thought it read really well, and it does compare those three, and it shows you where the buckets are. One of the other nice things about a transportation utility, of course, is that I guess nice depending on your perspective, but is that the tax exempt entities don't pay anything currently toward that. And so the school district, churches out there, stuff like that, they do fall into the trip generation manual, and there are ways to look that up. Again, it's per 1,000 square feet. In case of schools, it's per student. Ends up being, I think, as an example, Washington Elementary, I think was the exact number. I think it's like $1,000 a quarter. So just for kind of putting a metric to it, it's a fair size elementary school, and they go by enrollment.
So when do you think there'll be an announcement as to what they decide to do?
That's a good question. I think it'll get a lot of discussion tonight. I think that based on that, maybe they'll pick a direction and give staff some direction on what to start preparing. I think that by the time council comes and goes this month, we'll probably have a pretty good idea which direction they're leaning, and then we'll have our direction as far as what to prepare if we're preparing ordinance amendments to get another fee-based system going. We're pretty well ready for that. We cannot do a referendum unless it's decided by, I believe, January 26th for the April election, because there's something about a special spending referendum. I don't think you can do a special election for. I think there's some election rules in there. So it has to be on a routine election, and there isn't an opportunity again until the following year or October or something. So they need to decide that. They got to decide they're either going that way or not going that way by January 26th. So because of that, I think there will be a decision made on the approach this month, I would guess.
Are we as a water utility going to be asked to take a position on this, or is this for information?
No, yeah. The big thing there is that our involvement's going to be adding an item to the bill. That's pretty much it, and it's their work to tell us which properties get which item added. So in other words, how many ERTUs to each parcel, and it becomes a little watered down. It's not every one, just like on the storm side. Anything that's a residential unit is standard, right? So you blanket most of the city that way, and you start picking up all those that are non-residential and non like housing units, that kind of thing.
And again, I think you talked a bit about construction in the transportation budget. Is this going to cover all construction, or is this just you're carving out a chunk of 500,000?
Right, yeah. I mean, the Public Works right now has an operating budget that's somewhere between 4.5 and 5.5 million, I think.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not.
So it's like
everything.
10%. Is that how?
Yep.
And it's.
Yep. And again, toward eligible items. So there are things that are not eligible for this. For instance, you cannot create a transportation utility and have it pay for any part of street sweeping or snow plowing, because those things are, I guess, I don't know exactly how it's documented, but they're your obligation as a city when you collect taxes to do those things. There are services that the city could consider cutting back on or eliminating, and this is one way to not have to do that.
Joel, does the number of trips assigned to a residential unit, is that from the state DOT or? The
ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, they have a huge manual on the thing. It's like 900 pages. And it goes into the analysis of how they come up with all this. And then they have lookup tables that basically have all these different buckets. And then you look, and one of those things is basically single-family housing, 9.43 trips a day. I think that is the number, actually, 9.43, yeah.
A lot of trips.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Joel? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
I'll move to adjourn.
All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.